All right, guys, welcome back. We are moving into part 2 of the sugar chapter. And what's it called?
Sugar, the real demon in the diet.
So it's chapter 6 in the book. This is our first shoot back from Thanksgiving. So if mine and Kevin's insulin is actually spiking in the moment, it's because
right?
we did a little
carb overload.
A little carb overload. But, it's once a year.
Yep.
So we decided to break this one up because there was so much information in the chapter, and I don't remember specifically where we left off, but it was somewhere around glycation. Mm-hmm. Did we cover glycation?
No, I think that was one of the interesting parts that we said we were going to get back to. So let me kind of rewind a hair here. We're on sugar, right, as you may know, and why it's so bad for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a cholesterol book,
yeah.
Right?
So one of the interesting quotes, and we didn't say this last time, was, and that's what I was actually looking up, was from a PhD doctor, Dr. Barry Sears, PhD, author of The Zone Diet, and I really like the quote. He said, "Food may be the most powerful drug you will ever encounter because it causes dramatic changes in your hormones that are hundreds of times more powerful than any pharmaceutical." And, I've been talking with several folks privately on the side about their health and everything. And in doing that, I'm kind of explaining that and going, I know there's another book that I want to read, Food is Medicine, right? And there is absolute truth to this. And one of these toxic substances that you put in your body, sugar, can have the opposite effect of being nutritious.
Well, it's a fairly new phenomenon, right? I mean, we didn't eat high sugar to probably the last 100 years?
Yeah. Now one of the statistics was that a teenager eats 15% or more of their calorie intake in fructose, and we'll talk about the difference between fructose and sucrose in a little bit. But so let's go ahead. Let's move forward.
Summarize glycation.
So it's what happens basically when sugar gets into the body. It creates this sticky type substance that attaches to molecules where it doesn't belong.
Yeah, and one of the analogies they used was, think about cotton candy or syrup, which are pure forms of sugary food. Compare it to egg whites, or which is a protein that's slick, slimy. Fats, of course, tallows and lards, they're slick, they're slimy. So I mean, it's literally, think of it like sugar being a sugary substance, and it sticks to everything. Well, it does that inside the body. Why do you think that diabetics have circulatory issues, especially in the small parts, the feet, the extremities? It's because of that glycation. That's blocking up the blood delivery into those body parts.
And we're talking about different types of cholesterol, HDL, LDL, and what's the bad cholesterol? The bad cholesterol is LDL, and it gets really this bad rap. And really what happens, which was an eye-opener to me, is during glycation, right, the sugar attaches to the LDL and misforms it.
Yep.
Right? It causes damage to the LDL, which normally the body can handle, and as I like to say, take out the trash. But now that the LDL is damaged, it's running through these already hardened arteries.
Yeah. And
they're malformed.
So that's a good kind of transition, I think, into the different types of sugars, the glucose and the fructose, right? Because to get into the bloodstream, there's only one type of sugar. So let's rewind just a second. Straight table sugar is a 50-50 blend of glucose and fructose. So there's two major things that happen then. Glucose is metabolized in the bloodstream. Think glycation.
That's table sugar. That's pure.
No. Table sugar is a 50-50.
Okay, right.
Glucose and...
Okay, but I meant... Okay, you're correct. But I meant the glucose portion is taken out in the bloodstream. It's
correct.
It's worked in the bloodstream.
Correct.
And that's where it's added to the cells for energy, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
The fructose
metabolizes strictly in the liver. So you've heard of fatty liver disease, right?
Yep.
That's one, I forget his name, but there was a doctor quoted in here, and I think you have to understand the intention of the quote. He's not talking about healthy fats. He's talking about body fat. And he said, when you consume fructose, you're literally consuming an end product, which is fat. Like bad fat. I'm not talking healthy dietary fat. I'm talking fat.
Right.
And the fructose
is that portion,
that component.
So they talk about the sugar lobby a bunch and how it suppressed a lot of different things, and that was one of the things they went after, right? Was they tried to demonize high fructose corn syrup.
Right. Which this was really interesting. That table sugar is 50-50.
Right.
High fructose corn syrup
was 55-45, right?
Right.
Like no difference.
Right. There was barely a scientific difference. I mean, it's like,
It was basically the big lobby's way of playing the shell game. Oh, you're the bad guy now.
Right.
And before it was fats are the bad guy. Now it's high fructose corn syrup is the bad guy. It's really an interesting manipulation.
So I do want to touch on the lobbying aspect of this because I think it is a huge deal, and it's probably the number one cause for why we don't understand this stuff. So, for example, there were multiple studies from Dr. Adkins, who was a cardiologist. He gets no credit for that. We look at his keto foods in Sam's Club now. That wasn't him. He wrote a book called The Diet Revolution in 1972 as a cardiologist.
72.
Right.
Off of research done in 1960s.
Right. There was John Yudkin.
Yudkin was
that he did a study. I think the book said he gave everything from chickens, rabbits, pigs, and college students high sugar diets,
and they all spiked their triglycerides.
Right. There was Dr. George Mann, who said the current cholesterol fat discussion is the greatest scam, the greatest health scam of the century. Right?
We've probably been surpassed recently,
right?
maybe equal or lesser value. I don't know.
Right. So you say to yourself, what's this have to do with lobbying? Right. Well, there were multiple examples they go through in the book. I'll just talk about one. In 2003, the WHO, the World Health Organization, published a dietary guideline, and they recommended that less than 10% of your caloric intake should come from added sugars. So think processed foods. They have a lot of added sugars. And the sugar lobby here in America threatened to pull $400 million in funding through the politicians. And what happened? The politicians basically buried the report best they could. They wrote opinion pieces that said it was flawed data, that it was wrong. So there are big money players behind the scenes really controlling a lot of the information that we get and getting politicians, I can't stand them, to manipulate narratives.
And it's worse now. It's worse now that we have these PACs and everything else where, there's limitless to what kind of lobbying can go on. Right.
And, I don't want to correlate that to our current medical understanding.
Well, this goes back all the way to the days of donating to the American Heart Association by, I forgot it was, Procter and Gamble. I mean, or one of the big ones, Nabisco.
Oh, I know.
It was like 1930s or something. I mean,
the American Diabetes Association, their top 8, and when I say top, I mean by dollar amounts, their top 8 donors are pharmaceutical companies. 8.
Yeah. They don't want you to get healthy. They're not trying to solve a problem. They're wanting to keep you just there so you keep prescribing to that medicine.
So it's a kind of, wrapping up that chapter. It was a lot about lobbying, a little bit of an explanation of glucose and fructose and how they tried to demonize the high fructose corn syrup. to your point, it was the what do you call it? The scapegoat.
It was the scapegoat, right?
Right.
So one of the quotes quotes in the book, it wasn't really a quote, it was just a section, sugar, where he said, "Sugar is at the crime scene of virtually every illness. The arteries get inflamed, changes your LDL cholesterol, and sugar binds to proteins that it shouldn't bind to." And it said in one of the other sections, it talked about chaos, and it uses the acronym chaos, and he stands for coronary disease, hypertension, adult onset diabetes, obesity, and stroke.
Hey!
These are all the things. And when you classify obesity as an illness, quote unquote, that's really not an illness. That's a symptom of that's a condition, I would say. Obesity leads to all kinds of forms of cancer.
Right. Yeah.
So we're not even including everything. Like sugar, when they say sugar's at the, I mean,
it's at the core.
It's at the core, right? It's the fingerprints on the gun.
At a very fundamental, we learned in prior chapters that as opposed to cholesterol count, you want to pay attention to the triglyceride HDL level. Right. The number one driver of triglycerides is processed sugars. You cut them out, your triglycerides will drop like a rock. HDL is hard to move.
Right.
Triglycerides, very easy to move. What was so you guys have met Jarvis before he did the snack cast
right.
on the what was that, light therapy or something on the shoulder. But he pulled up his labs. And I think his HDL was like 69 and his triglycerides were like 65.
It was
under 1.
Under 1, which is huge.
I was you're going to live forever.
Pay attention to that ratio. That's a big one. And when that ratio gets to 3 to 1, that's not good for you. When it gets to 3.5, you're in trouble.
And sugar's the driver. It's very simple. It's not hard.
And there's addictive properties to sugar. I mean, he talks about that in this chapter as well, is how it's nobody picks up a bag of sugar and goes, this is good, this is good. It's like the combinations in the research that these food companies have done in order to make sugars and starches and sugars and wheats and sugars and other combinations.
Sugars, fats, and salts.
In order to make it really taste good and get that dopamine hit for you in your body, they've done the research. They want you coming back for more. And studies have also proven the more sugar you eat, the less satiated you actually feel. You've mentioned that several times.
I can't remember the gland, but it shuts off the gland that tells you you're full.
So
we've all done it, right? You sit down with a big steak, and by the time you're done, if you finish it, you're good to go. Sit down on Halloween night and you eat so many stupid mini Snickers bars.
Right. That you feel sick to your stomach.
Yeah. And you can't shut it off. It's science.
But you don't sit down and eat spoonfuls of sugar. You'll have it in combination with everything else.
Yep.
So they want you fat. They want you obese. They want you unhealthy.
Subscribe
they want you
to the meds.
They want you subscribing to the meds. Really, 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 we loved this chapter. It was fantastic.
Yep.
Do your research.
So I think the next chapter, I'm not going to look up the actual title, but I think it's The Truth About Fats. So that should be a good kind of 1-2 punch of the sugars, and now we're going to talk directly about the fats. So,
all right,
guys, questions, comments, concerns, grab a copy of The Great Cholesterol Myth or email us at snackcast@yes.fit.
Stay moving.
See ya.